My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm a 38-year-old elementary school teacher from a small town in Nebraska, and what I'm about to tell you is something I've only shared with a handful of people. Not because I'm afraid of being disbelieved. I stopped worrying about that a long time ago. But because the weight of it, the absolute soul-shattering weight of what I witnessed, is not something you say casually. For 4 years, I carried a question I was too afraid to ask out loud. Not afraid of the question itself. Afraid of the silence that would follow it. Afraid that if I spoke it into the world would have nothing to give me back. The question was this: where do they go? I'm not going to explain that right now. You'll understand soon. What I will tell you is that I got an answer. Not from a book, not from a pastor or a grief counselor or a well-meaning friend with a scripture verse ready. I got my answer from Jesus himself. In a place I never planned to visit, under circumstances I almost didn't survive. This is what happened to me. And I believe it is what happened for you. 4 years before the surgery, I was 16 weeks pregnant. My husband Daniel and I had been married for 3 years. We were careful, deliberate people. We had planned the pregnancy, told our families early because we couldn't contain it, started thinking about names. I was already looking at paint colors for the nursery. I was already in love. The day I lost the baby began like any other Tuesday. I was preparing a reading lesson for my 3rd graders when I felt something wrong. Not pain exactly, more like an absence of something that had been there the moment before. I called my OB from the parking lot of the school. The ultrasound room was cold. The technician moved the wand across my stomach without speaking, and that silence told me everything before the doctor came in. There was no heartbeat. There was nothing but still, dark space where there had been movement before. I drove home in a blur. I sat in my kitchen, and I couldn't cry because crying would have made it real, and I wasn't ready to let that happen. Daniel was devastated, but Daniel processed. That's who he is. Steady, methodical, anchored. He grieved, and then he moved forward. He said the things you say. It happens more than people realize. It wasn't our fault. We would try again. There was nothing we could have done. He wasn't wrong, but I couldn't follow him where he was going. Because the grief I felt wasn't clean. It wasn't just sorrow. It was a courtroom. And I was on trial in it every single day for things I could never prove I had or hadn't done. Had I been careful enough? Had I eaten something wrong? Pushed myself too hard that week at school, the week with the district testing? Had I somehow, in some way I couldn't name, failed this child before she ever had a chance? I never said any of that to Daniel. I smiled when he needed me to. I told him I was healing. I told myself I was healing. I wasn't healing. About 6 weeks after the miscarriage, late at night when Daniel was asleep, I sat in what was supposed to become the nursery, and I did something I hadn't been able to do until then. I let myself call her something. I let her be real just for me in that room. I called her Grace. I didn't write it down. I didn't tell anyone. I said it quietly once in the dark, and then I closed the door on that room, and I did what you do. I got up and went back to living. 4 years. That name lived only inside me. What happened next was not something I chose. It was something that chose me. I want to tell you exactly how it started. What happened to me that night in November was not a spiritual journey I planned or invited. It began with pain. I was in my kitchen making dinner on a Thursday evening when it started. At first, I thought it was a muscle spasm, the kind that comes from standing too long on a hard floor, but within 20 minutes, it had shifted into something else entirely. A deep, radiating agony that was climbing into my back, my shoulder, somewhere it had no business being. I sat down on the kitchen floor. That's the last thing I clearly remember choosing to do. Daniel found me on the floor 20 minutes later. He called 911. In the emergency room, things moved fast, faster than I had any capacity to track. Words reached me in fragments: ruptured ovarian cyst, internal hemorrhage, significant blood loss. Someone put a mask over my face. Someone said, "We need to go now." I remember the lights in the ceiling of the hallway as they moved me, those long strips of fluorescent white, one after another. Daniel was there beside the gurney until he wasn't. And then I was in a room with too many people and too much urgency, and someone was putting my arm out to the side, and somewhere in that moment, a thought moved through me. Not a prayer exactly, more like a whisper from somewhere I didn't choose. I thought about Grace. I thought, is this how I find out? My heart stopped on the operating table. I don't know the exact time and I haven't asked. Some details you protect yourself from. What I can tell you is that it was not a gradual fade. It was not like falling asleep. One moment there were fluorescent lights and the sound of machines and someone saying her pressure is dropping. And then there was nothing that I can honestly call darkness, because darkness implies the absence of light. What I experienced was the absence of absence. It was the removal of every lack I had ever felt all at once. And then there was light. It wasn't blinding or dramatic. It was the kind of light that feels like walking into a warm room after you've been cold for so long you've forgotten you were cold. It was welcome. It was personal. Like it had been waiting for exactly me. I felt completely myself. More myself, I think, than I had ever been in my body. There was no pain. There was no weight. Not physical weight, but the other kind. The kind that comes from carrying things for years. For the first time in 4 years, there was no guilt. It wasn't just suppressed or managed. It was gone. As if it had never existed. Or as if I had finally arrived at a place where it simply could not follow me. I stood there in that light, and I breathed, and breathing felt like something I was doing for the first time. He was already there. I want to be careful about how I say this because I don't want you to picture something theatrical or sudden. He didn't appear in a flash of light or descend through clouds. He was simply there, the way a person is already in a room when you walk into it. Present, unhurried. As if he had been expecting me, but without any sense of impatience or strain. I knew who he was. Not because of how he looked, though there was a quality to him I have no words for. I knew because of what I felt in his presence. Every question I'd ever been afraid to ask fell silent. Not because they were answered yet, but because in his presence, the fear that had surrounded them simply dissolved. He looked at me. He smiled. He said, "There is something you need to see." He did not ask if I wanted to see it. There was no offer, no negotiation. Just the calm certainty that this was why I was there and that he already knew what I needed before I had found the words to need it. He began to walk. I followed. The landscape shifted as we moved. It's hard to describe the geography of that place. I'm not sure geography is even the right word. It was as if the world deepened as we walked through it, as if each step opened more of something that had been folded up. Colors intensified that I could not name. There was a quality of light that seemed to come from no particular source, just present in everything, like warmth is present in a room. And then I heard them. Distant, unmistakable. The sound of children. We arrived at the edge of what I can only call a field. A vast, open field of impossible color. Not one color, but all of them. Layered and luminous and clean, in a way that made every field I had ever seen on Earth seem like a rough sketch. And in that field, children. Dozens of them, perhaps more. Running, laughing, at ease, in a way I had never seen children at ease. Not the restless, anxious ease of children who are being watched, but something deeper. They were completely free, untouched by fear. My first instinct was confusion. I watched them and I didn't understand what I was seeing. And then Jesus spoke. He said, "These are the ones who came before they could stay." I understood. Not all of them had been wanted on Earth. Some were, some weren't. Some had been grieved by whole families. Some had been carried by women who never told a single person. But Jesus told me something I was not ready to hear. Here, that distinction does not exist. Not a single one of them carries what happened to them on Earth. They are not defined by how they arrived or what they didn't get to do. Every one of them is known. Every one of them is held. And then he said something that broke something open in me. He said, "They are not frozen. They grow here. They are growing." I looked at those children running in that field, and I thought of a girl who would have been almost exactly 5 years old. I was still watching the field when I saw her. She broke from the group. Not the gradual way a child might drift toward something, but with purpose, with intention, with the kind of absolute certainty that takes your breath away. She was running directly toward me. She was about 5 years old. Dark hair, Something in the shape of her face that I cannot explain and will not try to. The recognition that moved through me was not something I processed with my mind. It came from somewhere deeper than thought, somewhere that doesn't need evidence. She reached me and she said one word, "Mama." I could not speak. I could not move. She looked up at me with absolute clarity, completely unafraid, and perfectly certain about who I was, why I was there, and what I needed from her. And then she said the name. Grace, my secret. My private name given alone in a dark room 4 years ago that I had never spoken to anyone, never written down, never prayed out loud. The name that had lived only inside me. She knew it. She said it. As easily as breathing, she said it because of course she knew it. Because she had always known it. Because she had been with me in that room on that night, even when I thought I was alone. I held her, and the holding was real. Not the ache of almost real that grief produces. This was real. She was warm and present and fully herself, a whole, joyful, complete person. She told me she was happy. Not the polite happy of someone trying to reassure you. The genuine, settled, unshakable happiness of someone who is exactly where they belong and has never doubted it. She told me she was never alone. Not for a single moment after she left. Not in the silence after the ultrasound. Not in the cold days that followed. Not in 4 years of my silence. She had always known. And then she said something I have carried with me every single day since. She said, "I have been waiting, not with sadness, with patience, because I knew you would need to see this." Jesus stood nearby, a little apart, not interrupting. Just present, allowing. This was the thing he had brought me here to receive. After some time, I have no sense of how long, time had no meaning there, Jesus spoke again. Not just about Grace, but about all of them. About every child in that field. About every child who has ever left before they could stay. He addressed the guilt directly. He did not speak around it or soften it. He said, "It was not your fault, not yours, not any of theirs." The word fault does not apply to what happened. There is no accounting in heaven that places the weight of a miscarriage on a mother's shoulders. None. He told me these children are not incomplete. They are not partial beings waiting for what they missed on earth, mourning the lives they didn't get to live. They arrived at their destination by a different route, a shorter route. But they arrived. They are whole. They are fully themselves. He told me something I was instructed to carry back. He said, "No parent who has lost a child this way is grieving alone. The children know. They are not in grief. They are in full joy. They are fully known, fully loved, and they know their families by name. Every one of them knows." I stood there in that field, and I thought of every woman I had ever known who had lost a pregnancy. My colleague at school who had a miscarriage the year before I had mine, and who stopped talking about it after 1 week because she sensed people wanted her to move on. My grandmother, who once told me briefly, without elaboration, that her first pregnancy didn't make it, and then changed the subject and never said another word about it in my presence. All those private griefs. All those secret names. They are known, every one of them. Their children are not lost. There are no words to explain what it felt like when he told me it was time to go back. The surgery, the operating room, Daniel. It was the hardest moment. Harder than the miscarriage, harder than the surgery itself, harder than 4 years of guilt. I did not want to leave Grace. She was standing in front of me, and she was whole and joyful and at peace, and I was the one who wasn't ready. I was the one clinging. She looked at me with the patience of someone who understands things I was still learning. She said, "Go, tell them." And then the field was gone. The return was not peaceful. It was a violent, breathtaking rupture, as if I had been pulled through something by force. Fluorescent lights, cold air, the smell of a hospital room, sound rushing back in from all directions. Someone saying her pressure is stabilizing. Someone else saying she's back. I heard the word stable. I was alive, in pain and exhausted and alive. The recovery room was dim and quiet, and Daniel was beside me holding my hand. I had no idea how long I'd been unconscious, or what they had told him while I was on that table. His face when I opened my eyes was the face of a man who had been very afraid, and who was now trying not to show how afraid he had been. I was barely conscious. I could feel the weight of everything in my body. The surgery, the blood loss, the blunt fact of what my body had been through. But there was something I needed to do before anything else. Something that had waited 4 years and could not wait another minute. I reached for Daniel's hand. I said, clearly and out loud for the first time in 4 years, Grace. I named her Grace. He broke. Not a quiet cry, something deeper, something released. He put his head down and he held my hand and he wept. And somewhere in his grief, I understood that he had been carrying his own version of this, in his own private silence, in the way that men who don't have the words for grief carry things. He had not known how deeply I was still in it. He had not known the name. He knew both things now. We stayed like that for a long time. I am healed now in ways I couldn't have predicted and couldn't have engineered. Not of grief entirely, and I don't think you ever stop loving what you lost. But the guilt is gone. The guilt that lived in me for 4 years and told me it was my fault and that I had failed her, it is gone. I know where she is. I know who she is. I know she knows me. I was sent back for a reason. I understand that now. Grace told me to go and tell them, and I have held that instruction for long enough. So if you are watching this and you have lost a child before they could stay, a miscarriage, a stillbirth, an early loss that the world gave you no ritual to grieve, I need you to hear this. Your child is not lost. They are not waiting in grief or darkness or confusion. They are running in a field of impossible color, in a place of complete safety and complete love, and they know your name. They have always known your name. They know the names you gave them in private, the names you said once in a dark room and never again. They know you will not grieve forever. And one day, not yet, not for a long while if you're lucky. But one day, you will arrive where I arrived and you will hear them running toward you. I heard my daughter call me Mama. And I promise you, yours knows your name too. I have told this story to parents who wept through every word, and I have watched something loosen in them that had been locked for years. That is why I was sent back. That is the only reason I am here telling you this now. If this story touched something in you, please share it. There are parents out there carrying this alone who need to hear what I was sent back to say. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the testimonies ahead. And leave a comment. Tell me if you're carrying a name that no one else knows. You are not alone in that, neither is your child.